All right, everyone, welcome back to the Bond Report. You ready to learn something awesome today?
Always. I love these deep dives.
Me too. And this one is really cool. Today we're going to be talking about falconry.
Whoa. That's going to be interesting. I don't know much about it, honestly.
Yeah, same here. Well, actually, I always thought it was cool. Like, those documentaries where you see those hunters with their eagles,
Yeah.
like soaring through the mountains. I always thought that was like the coolest thing. But I don't really know anything else about falconry.
Yeah, like how does that even work?
Yeah. So I thought it'd be fun to do a deep dive into an episode of The Bond.
Oh, yeah. I love that show.
Me too. Jo Bond is such a great host. She makes learning about animals so fun.
She does have a knack for it, that's for sure.
So this episode features Gia from Adam's Falconry, and it's all about, the art of falconry and working with these amazing birds. But before we get ahead of ourselves, maybe we should just start with the basics. What exactly is falconry?
Well, it's basically the ancient art of training birds of prey, raptors, to hunt in partnership with humans.
Okay, so it's like a team effort.
Exactly. It's a partnership that goes back thousands of years.
Wow. So it's not just falcons then, right?
Nope, not at all. It actually includes a whole bunch of different birds of prey, like hawks, eagles, owls.
I've even heard of people using vultures. Is that right?
Well, vultures are raptors, but they're not really used for hunting and falconry. Vultures are more like nature's cleanup crew.
Oh, right. They're more into, like, the after party.
Haha, exactly. But yeah, when it comes to falconry, we're mainly talking about birds that actively hunt live prey.
Gotcha. So back to Gia. What really stood out to me was her background. She's got a degree in animal science and a ton of experience in wildlife rehabilitation. That's not what you'd typically expect from someone who, works with these powerful hunting birds.
It's actually more common than you might think. A lot of falconers are super passionate about birds.
Well, that makes sense.
They really care about their well-being, and falconry is all about respecting the birds' natural instincts and building a bond with them.
It's definitely different from some of those, like, modern hunting practices that we see these days.
Yeah, it's a lot more about the connection between the human and the bird, working together as a team.
Gia actually said something like that in the episode. Something about it not being about dominating the bird, but about, working as a team.
Exactly. And that kind of partnership takes dedication. Like becoming a licensed falconer, it's not easy.
Really? What's involved?
Well, at least in California, you're looking at a 2-year apprenticeship.
Whoa.
2 years.
Yeah. You need a licensed falconer as your sponsor, and then you have to pass a bunch of exams to prove you know what you're doing.
Sounds pretty intense.
It is, but, when you're working with these powerful birds, it's super important to know what you're doing.
Absolutely. And you know what else Gia mentioned? She wants to combine her love of horses with falconry.
Oh, can you imagine that? Riding through the countryside with a hawk soaring overhead. Bucket list material right there.
That would be incredible. Talk about a unique perspective, right?
Totally.
And speaking of unique perspectives, it's cool how technology is being used in falconry now, too.
What do you mean? Like tiny saddles with GoPro cameras?
Not quite, although that would be hilarious. But researchers are using drones and tiny cameras that they mount on the birds' heads.
Oh, that's so cool. So they can, like, see what the bird sees?
Exactly. They're using it to study bird behavior in flight, and it's given them all sorts of new insights. It's amazing, like, having a bird's eye view of the world, literally.
That's awesome. And it reminds me of, okay, this might seem like a total jump, but stick with me here. You know how much I love learning about different dog breeds?
Of course. You're like a walking encyclopedia of dog facts.
Well, I recently found these super cute info mugs on this website, xpfe.fun. It's xpfe.fun. And they have all these adorable mugs with different dog breeds on them.
Oh, that's so cute.
And each mug has all these fun facts about the breed printed right on it.
Really? Like what?
Well, like, did you know that the Australian Shepherd wasn't actually developed in Australia?
No way.
Yeah, it's true. Or how about this? A bunch of school kids in Anchorage actually campaigned to make the Alaskan Malamute the official state dog of Alaska.
That's amazing.
I know. It's like a pocket-sized encyclopedia of dog knowledge.
Perfect for you. It kind of ties back to what we were saying about technology and falconry. They're both using these cool new approaches to help us understand and appreciate the animal world.
It's true. Okay, sorry, back to the birds. One thing that I found super interesting about falconry was all the specialized equipment they use. Gia talked about hoods and gloves, And those gloves, wow, they look serious.
They're pretty intense. They have to be, though, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Those gloves are there to protect the falconer's hand from the bird's talons. I mean, have you ever seen a hawk's talons up close? They are crazy sharp.
I bet. So it's all about safety for both the falconer and the bird.
Yes.
Exactly. And the gloves have all sorts of little details, like D-rings for attaching equipment.
Wow. And there was this one thing Gia mentioned that really blew my mind, this technique called imping.
Oh, yeah. It's pretty incredible.
So basically, if a bird breaks a feather, they can actually replace it with an old feather from a previous mold. It's like avian surgery or something.
It is. It's amazing what falconers can do. They carefully insert the matching feather into the broken shaft, and it basically grafts back together.
It's like they're feather engineers.
Yeah.
But it's not just for aesthetics, right? Gia mentioned they use it for rehabilitation, too.
You got it. It helps injured birds regain their ability to fly. It's pretty amazing how they can give these birds a second chance.
That's so cool. It really makes you think about how this ancient practice is still so relevant today. And not just for hunting either. Gia talked a lot about the ecological benefits of falconry, like using birds of prey for pest control instead of pesticides.
Right. It's a natural and sustainable approach.
Yeah. Got to be much better for the environment. It seems like a win-win for everyone involved.
Totally. It helps maintain a healthy ecosystem, and it's way better than relying on harsh chemicals. It just makes sense.
I'm really glad we decided to do this. I feel like I'm only just scratching the surface of this whole world of falconry. There's so much more to learn.
You're telling me we haven't even touched upon the training or the different techniques they use for different birds or the bond that develops between a falconer and their bird.
I know, right? And what about those high-tech cameras? I bet they're revealing all sorts of cool stuff about bird behavior.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So much to talk about. And don't worry, we're just getting started. We've got a lot more ground to cover in this deep dive. Buckle up. Okay, so where were we?
I think we were just about to really dig into the different kinds of falconry out there.
Oh, right. Like, it's not just one thing, right? It's not like everybody does it the same way everywhere you
Yeah.
go.
Exactly. And Gia, she really made that clear when she was talking about the differences between, like, falconry in Mongolia compared to what they do here in California. Like, in Mongolia, it's like a way of life, you know?
Right. It's totally tied into their culture.
Yeah, and it's often a matter of survival. Like, they really depend on it. Whereas here, it's more about, like, recreation and conservation.
Exactly. But even though the reasons for doing it might be different, that respect for the birds and that whole idea of partnership, that stays the same no matter where you go.
It's really cool how something so ancient can adapt and change. You know?
It is. It shows how strong that connection between humans and birds really is. And speaking of adapting, Gia also mentioned how certain birds are better suited for certain types of falconry, like Harris hawks, for example. They're really good for pest control.
Oh, yeah, because they hunt in groups, right?
Exactly. They're super cooperative hunters.
So they're already kind of programmed for teamwork. Does that make them easier to train for falconry?
Well, they definitely have a natural inclination for it. Like,
Yeah.
in the wild, they have this amazing strategy where different members of the group will take on specific roles during a hunt. Some flush out the prey, others ambush.
Wow, it's like a coordinated attack.
It is. And because they're already used to working together, that translates really well to falconry.
That's awesome. So they're basically bringing those natural instincts to the partnership.
Exactly. And that makes training them a little bit different.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, you know, Gia really emphasized the importance of positive reinforcement and building that trust with the bird. Like, it's not about forcing them to do anything.
It's more about working with their natural behaviors.
Right. Understanding their body language and rewarding them when they do what you want.
So it's a lot more about patience and observation.
Yeah. It's a lot more nuanced than just giving commands. It's about creating a relationship where the bird feels safe and confident.
And you know what? That kind of reminds me of what we were talking about earlier with those cameras they're putting on the birds' heads.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, I was thinking, those cameras must be giving researchers some incredible insights into how birds see the world and, like, how they communicate with each other.
Oh, absolutely. We're learning so much about their behavior, their decision-making, and how they perceive their environment.
Like, is it true that birds can see colors that we can't even imagine?
It is. Gia mentioned how crows, for example, which look plain black to us, might actually appear iridescent to other crows, with shades of purple and green because they can see ultraviolet light.
Whoa. That's so cool. So they're seeing a whole other world of color that's totally invisible to us.
I know, right? It's amazing. And it's not just crows either. Some raptors use UV vision to their advantage too. Like Harris hawks can actually track the urine trails of rodents, even in low light.
Wait, seriously, how's that even possible?
Well, rodent urine reflects UV light, so to a Harris hawk, it basically lights up like a beacon. It's like a superpower.
That's incredible. Nature is so cool. You know, it's funny, we were just talking about imping and how they can fix broken feathers, and now we're talking about ultraviolet vision.
It is kind of a wild ride, isn't it? But that's what I love about falconry. It opens up this whole world of amazing adaptations and behaviors.
It's like a crash course in avian biology.
Exactly. And speaking of imping, I'm still amazed by how that actually works.
Me too.
Yeah.
Can we talk more about that? Like, break it down a little.
Yeah, sure. So remember how bird feathers have those hollow shafts, right? Well, falconers can take a matching feather from a previous molt and carefully insert it into the broken shaft.
So they're basically like putting a splint on it.
Sort of, but it's way more delicate than that. They have to make sure everything aligns perfectly so the feather can grow back properly.
It sounds like it requires a lot of skill.
It does. And Gia mentioned that it's not just used for, like, aesthetic purposes.
Right. It can actually help injured birds fly again.
Exactly. It's a really important tool for wildlife rehabilitators.
So cool. It's amazing how something so ancient can be used to help these birds today. And that really brings us back to the whole conservation aspect of falconry, doesn't it?
Totally. Like using birds of prey for pest control instead of pesticides.
It's such a great example of how we can learn from nature and find these more sustainable solutions.
It's a win-win for everyone. It's good for the environment, it's good for the birds, and it helps us understand the importance of biodiversity.
You know, what's really hitting me now is that falconry isn't just about the birds or the hunting or even the conservation. It's about this whole connection to nature, this realization that we're all part of something bigger.
I totally agree. And it's a message that's more important than ever these days with all the challenges we're facing.
Definitely. Falconry reminds us that we can work with nature, not against it. We just have to be willing to learn from the past and find ways to integrate that wisdom into our lives today.
Well said. It's about rediscovering those ancient connections and finding ways to make them relevant in the modern world.
Exactly. But before we get too philosophical here, we still have more to talk about.
Oh, yeah, there's still so much to explore. Like, what about the ethical considerations around falconry?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. We haven't really touched upon that yet. Are there, like, concerns about the welfare of the birds or the impact on wild populations?
Those are definitely important questions, and we'll dig into those next. But for now, let's just take a minute to appreciate what we've learned so far.
You know, what's really struck me is the passion of people like Gia. They're not just falconers, they're educators, they're conservationists.
They're true ambassadors for the birds.
Exactly. Their enthusiasm is contagious.
Totally agree. It's inspiring to see that level of dedication.
I'm honestly feeling inspired myself. Like maybe I should volunteer at a wildlife rehab center or something.
Now you're talking. You don't need a hawk on your arm to appreciate the beauty of nature.
Really?
But hey, if you ever decide to take up falconry, you know who to call for a sponsor.
Deal. But first, let's finish up this deep dive. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on those ethical considerations.
You got it. Stay tuned, folks, because the Bond Report is just getting started.
All right, welcome back to the Bond Report. So as we're wrapping up this deep dive into falconry, I'm realizing it's not just about birds and hunting, is it?
Not even close. It's like there's this whole philosophy behind it.
Yeah, like a deep connection to nature.
Totally. Falconry is all about tradition, respecting nature, and that incredible bond between humans and birds. Makes you think, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like, what's our place in all of this? And, earlier you mentioned we should talk about the ethical side of falconry. Like, are there concerns about, how the birds are treated or like the impact on wild bird populations?
Those are really important questions. And honestly, any responsible falconer is going to be thinking about those things all the time.
Right, right. So, how do falconers make sure they're doing things ethically?
Well, for one thing, there are strict rules and regulations in a lot of places. Like, you have to have a license to practice falconry.
So it's not like just anyone can go out and like grab a hawk and start training it.
No, not at all. You have to be qualified. And those regulations cover a lot of stuff, like, where you get your birds from, how you train them, and like making sure they have proper care and a good place to live.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. And, Gia mentioned that a lot of falconers are really involved in conservation, too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They play a huge role in keeping an eye on wild populations, rehabilitating injured birds.
So they're actually helping to protect these birds.
Exactly. They even do breeding programs to help boost populations of threatened species. It's really amazing work.
I'm so glad we did this deep dive. It's really changed the way I think about falconry. It's not just a sport, it's like a way of life.
Well said. That's what's so great about the bond. It really gets into those deeper aspects.
And Gia was such a fantastic guest, so knowledgeable and passionate.
She's a great ambassador for falconry.
Definitely. Well, I think it's safe to say this deep dive was a success. We learned so much about falconry.
Thanks to the bond and to Gia.
For sure. And thanks to all of you for listening to the Bond Report. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of falconry. And remember, you don't need to have a hawk on your arm to appreciate the beauty of nature and the importance of respecting wildlife.
Couldn't agree more. Until next time, keep exploring and learning. And as Joe Bond says, until we bond again.
Until we bond again.